The label on this steak says grass-fed, yet it doesn't mean the cow wasn't given grains, hormones, or antibiotics. And the label cage-free likely conjures images of chickens roaming on pasture, yet they may have been raised in overcrowded warehouses with thousands of others. And this is only the beginning of the disingenuous labeling in the meat industry. Huge food corporations know you want to buy sustainable and ethical meat, so they exploit loopholes and craft clever claims that make you think the meat was raised on a beautiful family farm when it came from an operation more like a factory farm. So in today's episode, we'll unravel the mystery behind 10 of the most confusing meat labels and identify 4 steps you can take to find truly healthy meat that is good for animals, humans, and the planet. I think you can agree, it's time to rethink meat and confusing meat labels.
So whenever you're out shopping,
The stuff you get at the grocery store and
truthfully labeled.
Until labels can get at that
How can
kind
you
of
be sure?
complexity.
wash everything to make it sound really
The
natural.
thing to remember is to read the label.
When we buy meat, we all have priorities that motivate us to choose the healthiest, most sustainable, or humane options.
If there's 3 jugs of milk on the shelf, if one was more nutritious and one was less, would that affect your choice of which one to purchase?
Yes.
We can help people make those decisions.
And meat labels are often the tools we use to navigate these decisions. Sadly, terms like natural, grass-fed, pasture-raised, organic, free-range, and cage-free don't often mean what you think they do. In fact, greenwashing is a rampant practice where misleading or false statements are made about a product to make it seem more environmentally friendly than it is. Meat companies know you want high-quality meat, but it's also costly to change the way they do business, so they get creative with their marketing terms. The Food Safety Inspection Service, or the FSIS, of the USDA regulates food labels, often approving claims based on written descriptions rather than on-site visits, and has a history of lax regulation. An Animal Welfare Institute report found that nearly half of 97 USDA-approved meat label claims had no application, a third provided no or inadequate evidence, and 85% lacked sufficient substantiation. Several senators also wrote to the FSIS urging better regulation. Despite the vast array of labels designed to make you feel all warm and fuzzy about the meat you buy, over 90% of the grocery store meats come from factory farms. In fact, according to 2017 estimates, 8.9 billion chickens, 520 million fish, 362 million egg-laying hens, 285 million turkeys, 66 million cows, and 71 million pigs, or over 10 billion animals were factory farmed versus 40 million that were not. And though niche markets are growing, only 4% of the 26 billion pounds of beef produced in 2023 was grass-fed, less than 1% was actually labeled as such, and up to 80% of grass-fed beef was imported. In other words, healthier, sustainable, American-raised meats remain a small part of the market. Now let's explore how to identify truly healthy meat, starting with a brief introduction to the anatomy of a label. Now, all meat labels are required to include, number 1, a product name, 2, a number representing the processing plant, 3, the address of where it was inspected, 4, the net weight or quantity, 5, the ingredients, and 6 safe handling instructions. But beyond these basics, here are 10 of the most misunderstood label terms, starting with number 1, natural. Consumer Reports found that 62% of consumers look for natural on labels, assuming it means no chemicals, artificial ingredients, pesticides, or GMOs. However, on meat labels, natural only really means no artificial ingredients or added color and minimal processing, revealing nothing about the animal's diet, living conditions, or harvesting methods. Number 2, Product of America. Contrary to popular belief, Product of America doesn't guarantee domestic origin, and meat could be imported and merely processed and packaged in the United States. And up to 80% of grass-fed beef in America is imported from other countries, as elucidated by Professor of Animal Science, Dr. Jason Roundtree.
That there is a greater and growing amount of grass-fed beef that's being imported versus domestically raised. And that's a main thing that with today's USDA labeling, companies can bring in grass-fed beef. They can blend it with domestic beef. They can process it in a USDA facility, and it will say product of the USA. It's certainly different than born and raised in the USA, right?
Starting in January 2026, the USDA will allow Product of America label only for animals born, raised, and harvested in the United States. But until then, be cautious and remember that using this label is voluntary. Number 3, raised without antibiotics. Approximately 73% of antibiotics worldwide are used in animal agriculture, and though it suggests antibiotic-free production, it's not always foolproof. Variations like no antibiotic growth hormones or raised without medically important antibiotics may still allow use for disease prevention or non-human use antibiotics. Consumer Reports and producers like regenerative chicken farmer Matt Wadiak also point out that the USDA residue limits are higher than those of other agencies and may be problematic.
This bacteriologist tests for evidence of antibiotics or other preservatives, which are not permitted in federally inspected products.
The level of testing and the levels of antibiotic use are so poorly set and lobbied for by the big chicken industry that even if a chicken was heavily medicated, it might be below the threshold for USDA acceptance. So you could pretty much write antibiotic free on anything, even heavily medicated animals, and pass USDA testing.
A 2015 Environmental Working Group analysis also found antibiotic-resistant bacteria on 79% of ground turkey, 71% of pork, 62% of beef, and 36% of chicken. Non-for-profit Moms Across America also found several veterinary antibiotics and compounds called ionophores in fast food meat.
While human antibiotics might not be used as much as they were in poultry, which is true, they're using animal antibiotics called ionophores predominantly. And ionophores are essentially antimicrobials that can create pathogen resistance and create health issues. And we know now that there are bacterial strains in chicken that can pass to people. And when you are handling the wrong kinds of chicken at home, you can develop antibiotic resistance when you touch that food.
Researchers from George Washington University and In-Depth also tested 669 cattle within the No Antibiotics Ever program overseen by the USDA and found that 15% of the animals still tested positive for at least one antibiotic, and 26% of cattle in the Global Animal Partnership program also had received antibiotics. Given that antibiotic resistance kills over 700,000 people annually, caution with these claims is warranted, and it also doesn't guarantee other drugs weren't used. Number 4 is cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised. Cage-free is often found on eggs and means chickens aren't kept in small cages, but it doesn't mean access to outdoor space, and chickens may be confined indoors with thousands of others. Free range suggests chickens on an open field, but only requires outdoor access, often through small doors leading to limited outdoor spaces and sometimes just concrete or dirt plots.
It's a real problem, and USDA does not really monitor it or manage it. There's no real governance. These are all affidavit-based claims that don't really mean anything. It's just signing a piece of paper for the most part.
And pasture raised suggests that animals have access to pasture throughout their entire growing season, but similar to free range, with no government definition of pasture, it's loosely regulated and can fall victim to abuse. Number 5 is vegetarian fed. While touted as a positive label, it overlooks the natural omnivorous diet of chickens and pigs, leading to potential nutrient deficiencies. Moreover, it implies they are raised in confinement without access to pasture for natural foraging behaviors. Number 6 is heritage pork. Heritage refers to traditional pig breeds with centuries-old lineages like Berkshire's, as described by regenerative pig farmer John Arbuckle.
When they decided that low-fat pork was going to sell more pork, they really worked extremely rigorously on the genetics of the factory farm pigs.
Can you blame the alert shopper for picking up some other type of meat if she can't find good, lean pork? Solution to this problem lies in producing a meat-type hog. And these are hogs the buyers like to see, too. Take a good look at them as they come off the truck. They're not over-fat.
And they basically figured out how to almost clone their pigs. So they basically have all these little white pigs that are extremely lean. And as a result of that, the factory farm pork is extremely dry.
And is carrying too much fat to be suitable for the American housewife.
There's a lot more gristle.
Despite misconceptions associated with pasture or humane treatment, heritage solely describes genetic lineage, offering no insight into the diet, drug use, or living conditions.
You could raise heritage breed pigs in a CAFO. I don't know anybody who is, but you could. So heritage breed simply means that you have some of the older genetics, because we just go backwards in genetics, and sometimes in order to make progress, that's what you have to do. If you've gone down the wrong road, you have to go backwards to get on the right road.
Number 7 is organic. Now, USDA organic certification does assure third-party inspection and prohibits antibiotics, growth hormones, GMO feed, and synthetic fertilizers. However, it still has shortcomings, as discussed by founder of the Bionutrient Institute, Dan Kittredge.
I watched my parents write some of the first organic standards in the country in the 80s. 2 years later, the government said, and now we're going to take it over and own it. And then the companies came in, and now what it used to mean and what it means are two different things. Pigs don't have to be outside. Chickens don't have to be outside. Like, cows don't have to eat grass.
Under USDA regulations, cows need only 120 days on pasture annually and may be fed in feedlots. For birds, screened porches have been documented to count as outdoor access. Additionally, organic standards lack care requirements for weaning, space, transport, and harvesting. While better, organic still has significant gaps. Number 8 is grass-fed. In 2016, the USDA stopped regulating the grass-fed label, leaving it far more prone to abuse.
Pasture raised can involve grain being dumped on the pasture. Like, as long as the cows are on a pasture, the grass can be 2 inches tall and they can dump the grain on the ground, and then the cows are eating grain, even though they're technically in the pasture, but it's marketed as pasture finished, and so you don't really know that's what's going on, and I think a lot of labels are disingenuous.
Because most livestock consume grass at some point, many meat producers exploit the grass-fed label to inflate prices. Research by Dr. Jason Roundtree showed many producers selling grass-fed meat were likely feeding cattle grains, evident from their high omega-6 to 3 ratio. Some cattle are also confined and fed grass or grass pellets. Now, the misuse of the grass-fed label drove us to establish Wild Pastures, an ethical meat delivery service that provides truly pasture-raised products. Number 9 is beef grades like Prime, Choice, and Select. Beef grades primarily reflect fat distribution and do not indicate how the animal was raised.
So here was always the dilemma with grass-fed. It was 2.5 to 3 years to get an animal to slaughter weight. Let's speed it up. They began the grading process so that when meat was sold, it was standard, select, choice, prime.
The Federal Meat Grading Service is inaugurated in 1927. To designate grades, experts judge conformation or the proportion of meat to bone, the degree of marbling or distribution of fat within the lean, and the amount and character of the fat itself.
Though prime is often considered desirable, this term almost always guarantees grain feeding.
They found that if they fed the animals grain, they could shorten that time from 3 years to 2 years and produce more flavor because it would put fat on the animal.
Finally, number 10, no hormones added. Now, this claim is relevant for beef and pork, but meaningless for chicken, poultry, bison, or veal, as hormone use in chickens has been illegal for decades. Many other commonly used labels lack a clear definition or third-party verification, including humanely raised, raised with care, no animal byproducts, sustainably raised, and crate-free. So now that we understand what is not well substantiated, what labels and claims can we look for?
On the consumer labeling debate, American Grass-Fed Association has producers that are certified. Animal Welfare Approved has those. Audubon has a new group, Audubon Bird Friendly Beef. Most aptly, I think that, the cushy feel-good thing is to say, know your farmer, know your food. And I get it, but likewise, we're all busy. And let's be kind of pragmatic here.
Here are 4 tips for finding high-quality meat that aligns with your values. Number 1, rely on third-party certification. Many meat claims rely on written descriptions from producers without verification. To ensure authenticity, look for third-party certifications that inspect and verify that animals are raised under specific welfare standards. Check their logos on labels or visit websites for certified producers. Now, the USDA also offers process-verified and organic shields, which do involve inspections, but please beware, not all third-party certifications guarantee animals are humanely or appropriately raised, so please check their criteria carefully. Number 2, look for these verified labels. Look for American Grassfed Association certification for beef, lamb, goat, pork, and bison, which requires inspections every 15 months. Certified animals are grass-fed, do not consume GMOs, antibiotics, and hormones, and are raised with a focus on environmental stewardship. They also certified truly pastured pork. For eggs and poultry, look for pasture-raised claims and call the company to verify if necessary. Also consider animal welfare approved certification for continuous outdoor access and humane practices. Certified Humane offers another option, though its standards are less stringent, permitting antibiotics in illness. Number 3, look for producers that use regenerative practices. For those interested in buying meat from producers actively using animals to restore environmental health, ask about regenerative practices like rotational grazing, or look for certifications like Certified Regenerative, Regenerative Organic, the Real Organic Project, Regen Score, Land to Market, and Regenified. These programs focus on building soil, enhancing biodiversity, and even sequestering carbon. Number 4, ask questions. Now, certifications can be costly, and some ethical producers may forego it. Contact local farmers to inquire about their practices, such as grain feeding, GMO feed, pasture time, confinement and use of hormones and antibiotics or other drugs, and ensure animals are born and raised and processed in the United States for full transparency. In conclusion, though meat labels are poorly regulated and confusing, the way meat is raised profoundly impacts human, animal, and planetary health.
Meat by itself doesn't make the product. It's what it's fed, it's how it's fed, it's how it's cared for.
And every time we buy meat, we vote for the food system we're willing to tolerate.
Animal products are a very significant part of a lot of people's diets globally. The way that most animals are raised that are in the industrial supply chain is not healthy for the animals, is not healthy for the environment, and is not healthy for humans. So I'm not an advocate of people stopping eating animal products. I'm an advocate of animals being raised well so that we can have those positive ecological, animal welfare, human health impacts.
So will it be cage-free and free range, or chickens truly on pasture, or imported grain-fed beef, or truly grass-fed beef from American family farmers that is restoring environmental health? Your choices can harm or support animals, people, and the planet.
It's about the 3 choices you have on the shelf. And if we can facilitate that empowerment where people can have honest understandings of which one's better, which one's worse, and they choose the better ones, then that's going to incentivize farmers to focus on building soil, which is going to reverse climate change, which is going to reverse chronic disease, which is going to create a dynamic where we don't need agribusiness.
By opting for antibiotic-free, pasture-based, and regenerative meat production, we create the future that our children and generations to come will be grateful for, and will also feel a little bit better ourselves.
We're about 3 generations in to eating quite poor quality food, and we are degenerating. Basically solve a lot of problems by working in harmony with life, by becoming more well ourselves.
Thank you for watching ReThink Meat. I hope this video has helped illuminate the truth behind meat labels and how powerful you are in creating the food system this world needs.